NBA trade season is creeping closer, and the Sixers are at the top of the list for teams to watch. One of the most common names involved in things is Dejounte Murray. We have some interesting new reports to break down, kind of touching on both sides of the optimism and pessimism for the Dejounte Murray trade. So I want to get into that, as well as some insight within the locker room of some of the players' belief in the season, what their stance is on the trade talks, and a lot of interesting stuff to break down. So I want to kick things off with the tweet that initially got my attention here, and this being the teams that are interested in Dejounte Murray, according to Jake Fisher of Yahoo Sports, and it lists off the Pistons, Knicks, Sixers, Heat, and Lakers here for the most interested in Dejounte Murray. Now, some interesting names there for starters. The Pistons, obviously on a losing streak, a bottom barrel of the NBA team, that trading for Dejounte Murray would essentially be a plea to get them back to mediocrity. When you look beyond that, the Knicks is a strange fit to me when you consider they just went all in for OG, that they already have a ball-dominant point guard in Jalen Brunson there, and just got rid of Emmanuel Quickly, who provides some similar layers to what Dejounte Murray does. Quickly more of, I guess, a pure scorer and a guy that was more, I guess, handcuffed for opportunity due to sitting behind Jalen Brunson, that I think there's much more likelihood that Murray and Brunson can play together than was the case with Quickly and Brunson, but still interesting there. And then the teams that I truly think are going to be in the conversation, the Sixers, which I will talk in depth about, the Heat, who do need another guy there to help contribute, and Murray does seem like a Heat style of player, and the Lakers, who have been heading down disaster and need kind of any semblance of something to change things. I would be shocked if the Lakers don't make some sort of significant move just to right the ship and give them a puncher's chance this year, because it has been ugly on that side of Los Angeles lately. But I do want to specifically address the Sixers side of things there. There was a lot of nice little nuggets from Jake Fisher in this article talking about the Sixers' point of view, his perspective, and everything else. So I'm going to kick things off with the bottom paragraph that Fisher writes here, which was fully about the Sixers. So we'll start off with looking at this right here. And Fisher writes, quote, "Philadelphia is not in any rush to add a piece or burn any of the Sixers' newfound draft capital by way of the Harden trade," sources said. Philadelphia has been conducting due diligence on various point guards available for the trade market, although Tyus Jones doesn't seem to be a target to keep in mind for the Sixers, sources said. If the Hawks don't operate with urgency to find a deal, perhaps a trade could come to fruition for Murray closer to the deadline. That being said, there's little expectation among league figures that the Sixers will pursue Siakam or LaVine during this trade window. So some good stuff there from Jake. For starters, the biggest point that I think he was referencing here is that the Sixers are not in a rush. That what we've come to know with Daryl Morey, patience, patience, patience. That he's willing to push this right up to the trade deadline and not willing to sacrifice the opportunity cost of a player that could potentially be available for one that he knows is available now. Now, you can have your thoughts about the philosophy. Personally, I kind of wholeheartedly disagree with that I'm more of the mindset that when you know a guy is there, that as Dejounte Murray is very clearly available, and I'm going to touch deeper on that, you know he's available. There might not be a guy coming better than Dejounte Murray. There might not be a cleaner missing piece than Murray. So if that is the guy, go out and get him is how I feel. Now, if the Sixers are not sold that he is that guy, that's a different story and a more fair critique to hold back. But I did think that was worth noting there. And I did want to touch specifically on the Murray market here. This is another little nugget from Jake, and he writes in this one, quote, "Now consider the possibility two-time All-Star Zach LaVine, who Chicago has explored moving since the summer, league sources told Yahoo Sports, and the Raptors' other premium free agents to be, All-Star forward Pascal Siakam, could both remain with their incumbent franchises past the February 8th buzzer. Hawks combo guard Dejounte Murray may well represent the next best player who's actually moved during these final theatrics of NBA's transaction period." So kind of surprising there that we've heard so much Zach LaVine noise since the start of the season, really dating back to the summer, as Jake mentions there, that the likelihood of him being moved is looking less and less. That it seems like the matchup, and you do have to think about this from the Bulls' perspective. For starters, they've been playing better basketball lately, winning games. Zach LaVine playing next to Kobe White, which I do think is an incredibly noteworthy detail there. That my biggest sell for why LaVine needed to be moved is that Kobe White was dominating. That in LaVine's absence, Kobe White stepped up and looked like a real deal hooper, a guy that deserves a chance at earning those keys to the franchise. Now that there is some cohesiveness between both Kobe White and Zach LaVine on the floor, you can kind of talk yourself into it a little more. And also just the market price for Zach LaVine is far too low for what it would be worth it to the Bulls. That massive contract is struggling to make teams commit, and you can absolutely see the logic behind that. We're talking about a guy owed close to $200 million still, 4 years on the contract. That's a lot that you have to believe in Zach LaVine as that long-term fit. Pascal Siakam, a very different situation, but an interesting note about Siakam that I did want to note here is this quote from Jake as well. "A trade can certainly be reached over the coming weeks, But for all those complications, rival executives are prepared for the possibility that Siakam could remain in Toronto, where the Raptors would have to consider extending him. The parameters surrounding a Siakam trade aren't going to change. Why should any team risk sending out valuable rotation players and draft capital for a veteran who could simply net out as a half-season rental? And why should a team projected to have cap space that believes it can be a lucky bidder to land Siakam come June 30th sacrifice anything similar? Both Indiana and Detroit have serious room to play with this summer, so will Philadelphia, with Siakam's former Raptors coach Nick Nurse manning the bench, and that has league personnel pinning the Sixers as another potential free agency boogeyman to scare off Siakam trade deadline bids. So interesting, the connection here. I think very clearly what Jake is indicating is Siakam's not a potential target that the Sixers would be dishing out assets to bring in, but they are expected to be in play come this summer. That I feel like I talk every single video about this cap space plan by Daryl Morey and how much he's leaning on the flexibility come summertime to build out this roster as he sees fit. Siakam seems like a guy in that category of player that much rather wait till the summer and address full out in free agency rather than giving up additional assets to get him right now. Now, with Siakam, I won't say I'm the biggest Pascal Siakam guy, not denying that he's the best player we've had in this conversation. He's a better basketball player than Zach LaVine, better basketball player than Dejounte Murray, but I'm a big fit guy, that it's about rounding out this roster, making things complete, that I've seen enough efforts to jam missed pieces on the Sixers team, whether it be Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid and now Horford. I've seen this team lean into the talent side of things and not consider fit well enough, and it has sunk them year after year. So for me, the biggest mindset is get the right piece that completes this team. And it seems to be the mindset within the Sixers locker room as well. That Pat Bev on a recent podcast, his Pat Bev podcast with Roan, he had $1 million worth of game, and Gilly brought up kind of a conversation about are the Sixers going to be active at the trade deadline, and Pat had an interesting quote here. He said, quote, "You can't let this year with Maxey. You can't let that just go to waste. Can't let Embiid go to waste. Nurse ain't having that shit. He wants to win at a high level, so you got to make this team better." And for starters, shout out both those guys. Love the Pat Bev pod. Love $1 million worth of game. Two of my favorite podcasts, and cool to see them collab on this episode. Also interesting to see Pat Bev have this sort of mindset when he's obviously on the Sixers as a whole. And frankly, a player that they're likely going to be trading for will likely eat into his minutes on the floor as a whole. So kind of interesting there. But what that does tell me, that quote from Pat Bev, is that there is a belief in this locker room. That Pat Bev, and I would expect this to be translated across the locker room and across the team, Pat Bev believes this team has a fighting chance this year. And Daryl Morey has been open in years past, speaking that if you as a team believe you have a 5% or greater chance at a championship, you owe it to go all in that year. That there's enough just weird details and things can happen, whether it be injuries to the team in front of you or anything can happen come playoff time. Just missed matchups that don't work well in the playoffs. The opportunity could arise where all of a sudden there is a pathway to the NBA championship. And if the Sixers believe they're in that conversation, they have to go for it. Pat Bev is absolutely right about that. And frankly, I'd agree with them that I do think the Sixers meet that qualification of having at least a 5% chance of winning the championship. Now, do I feel that this roster, as currently constructed, is ready to contend and start a parade down Broad Street and break that streak since 1983 that the Sixers have not won a championship? No, I'm not ready to say that. But how I do feel is that they are a stone's throw away from these other teams. That I do think if the Sixers get this deal right, if they get that missing piece, they add that one impact player, that all of a sudden they are in business. That they can contend with the biggest threats around the league and really have a chance at the championship there. So I do love that Pat Bev is being outspoken and saying that. It is once again surprising considering that I do think that will feed into the minutes of Pat Bev specifically on the court. But the Sixers need that I've been impressed with Pat Bev and what he brings to this team overall from a locker room perspective, from an attitude perspective, but from the overall talent level, they got to have a guy a little better. And no disrespect to Pat once again, still want him in the rotation, but the Sixers are missing firepower. It's become incredibly clear due to the games missed with Joel Embiid, the lack of impact on the floor when he is not there. So I do think that there needs to be improvement. Overall, very interesting how we're kind of getting these conflicting reports on Dejounte Murray specifically. I do think that we will continue to see whispers, continue to hear trade rumors, and see what overall happens. But I do think the Sixers would be wise to be a little more proactive than seems to be the case. That the market may not get much better. The countdown is coming until that final day. And I do want the Sixers to be the winners of this. That they cannot let other teams around the league in the Eastern Conference get better as they maintain and sit still. That would be unacceptable. And they, based on the assets that they have, just should not be the case. So I would like to see the Sixers get active. I'm kind of torn on whether I'm believing it to be the case or not, and also still kind of torn on whatever that means if Dejounte Murray will be the guy or not. But I do want to hear what you guys think in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. Are you all in on Dejounte Murray? I'm pretty close to all in on Dejounte, but not quite all the way in. So let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure to smash that subscribe button, drop a like on this video, and I'll be talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest.